Teaching History. It's a Summative Assessment 4 and it's by McKie. Historical thinking and pedagogy. I believe that it's a teacher's duty to create enthusiasm and curiosity for history. I believe that teachers' knowledge is imperative and it's an ongoing journey. It's not once you've learned something, that's it, move on to the next thing. I think there's constantly new information and new knowledge that can be gathered regarding history of our country and the world around us. Access to various sources, I think, is important, whether you have videos, books, maps, verbal accounts. Remembering that our children, all of them, have different methods and styles of learning, and relevant textbooks. This is my big bugbear because I'm teaching from a book that was printed in 2012, and I don't think it's relevant in today's 2023. I think there's far more information that can be gathered, and I also believe that new textbooks should be printed on a regular basis on what we give our children in our history classrooms. Ubuntu in primary history education. Ubuntu is the African philosophy that I am because we are. In essence, it goes to state that I exist because you exist, and we are together, and we are not individuals. We live off each other and we survive off each other. You can't be human all by yourself. I am because we are again. Within the spirit of Ubuntu comes sympathy, human rights and responsibilities, social justice, willingness to share. And this is an important part in the history classroom, is if you have a spirit of Ubuntu in your classroom, the children, irrespective of who they are, should feel safe and confident and comfortable to share their ideas and their thoughts. Forgiveness is a big part of Ubuntu, empathy and inclusivity. Another thing that's important within Ubuntu is that the respect for our environment, remembering again that we cannot survive without our environment, so we have to take care of our environment. And Ubuntu is the care and love and respect and understanding and tolerance for each other. Controversial and emotive issues in primary school history education. You can see there I have Bartholomew Diaz. He was one of the first explorers from Europe to find Southern Africa, and Vasco da Gama came along with that. Another emotive issue is democracy and citizenship. That's in grade 6. The transatlantic slave trade in grade 7. Colonization of the Cape in the 17th and 18th centuries. Cooperation and conflict of the Cape Colony in the 19th century. And there you can see the photograph that I've done there is when the Dutch finally land in Cape Town with Jan van Riebeeck. And there you can see the slide at the bottom is my transatlantic slave trade, where the slaves were taken from Mali. Mansa Musa was one of them, and they traded through to the Americas, where they became slaves and they were auctioned off. Highly, highly, highly emotive issues. Another one is the democracy and the end of apartheid in our country. I am a firm believer that these topics have to be covered in primary school history education. I think running away from these topics doesn't help fully functioning, understanding, tolerant adults that go into society. This is part of our history. There's part of the history around the world, and that's something that we have to learn about and understand, and see the cause and effects and the long-term effects that have happened because of these events that happened around the world. The solution for teaching practices on these emotive issues. If I look at in my history classroom, I try as much as I can. In fact, I just take emotion out of it. I give the historical perspective. I do the cause and consequences. I do primary sources, secondary sources, as many sources as I can get my hands on to provide information, knowing that these different sources of information do actually disagree with one another and have opposing thoughts. And This is important when gathering information on history and analyzing it and putting it together and coming up with an informed decision. And you look at the historical significance, the ethical dimensions afterwards, and you can see how different people, different cultures, if we look at South Africa today, the cultures that we have in this country, we wouldn't have Bobotie, and so on and so forth, and our lovely Durban curry, if it wasn't for the people who ended up as slaves in the Cape. Not saying that it was a good thing, but it is part of our heritage and who we are today. And there's also the understanding and empathy for those people and their generations and their communities of what they've experienced in their lives. Visual media is a very powerful source of information. Again, I've said my multiple sources that can give me different perspectives on an historical event. The various accounts, letting children talk and share their ideas of what their experiences are, what their families went through, the different points of view. We have to learn to be tolerant and accepting of people's different points of view. Empathy is a huge part of history. Analyzing, with all the information that we can gather, we can analyze it. The cause and effect of what happened. Sourcing, we have to teach our children when they are given a source, whether it be visual, auditory, they have to be able to look at it objectively and say, who wrote this? What is the author's point of view? Why was it written? When was it written? Is the source reliable? And on the bottom slide, I've got the different primary sources and then fun ways to teach historical thinking. I'm on the firm believer that controversial topics, you tackle head on, you give the information, you don't bully, you don't override somebody else's opinion. I know that in the school that I was at last year, I was not allowed to teach democracy. This year I'm allowed to teach democracy, but I'm not allowed to teach the transatlantic slave trade, which I disagree with wholeheartedly. I think it's a very important time in history, and I think children should be made aware of it. And I know that it's controversial, but if it's taught correctly, it's not to garner a negative emotional response. It's to state the facts and give the information of what happened in our history so that it doesn't reoccur and we can learn from our past. And then together, all of us can move forward with a greater understanding and better knowledge of what actually happened.